because I do 1,300 crunches and sit-ups 4 times a week.
What's a dose? Can you translate for us?
Winner of the gold medal and the champion golfer of the year is Ernie Els.
Alrighty, everyone. Well, welcome back to episode number 10 of the Go to Track. Carl, can you believe we've made it to double figures?
I can, because if you count all of our family that listen to the Go Track, we're apparently the number one golf podcast in the country, which is pretty unreal. But thanks to family and friends and Jerome, who listened to the Go Track for the first time on the way home.
Jerome, I'm going to introduce you quickly. Thanks for joining us this evening. Guest on the Go Track. Do you want to go ahead and give us your full credentials?
Thanks guys for having me on. My credentials is not much to really speak of. What I do enjoy though is I'm quite a ferocious Twitter user, but literally just rugby. It's about the only thing I converse with people on. So I'm hoping I can maybe add some value in that domain.
Well, that's exactly why we got you on. Well, no, we're actually going to just talk golf this evening, but I mean, give your inputs.
I thought the golf season ends after the majors.
Yeah,
well,
right.
it has been a little bit of a lull. Yeah, it has been a lull. Look, we do have the Ryder Cup coming up next week, so that's probably one of the highlights of the golf calendar.
Absolutely.
For a 2-year period, actually. But honestly, if you had to mention golf to someone at the moment, or if you had to mention 7-1 to someone at the moment, I don't think they would be claiming that to be the latest score between United and Liverpool. I think 7-1 is what everyone's on. What's on everyone's lips is the bench for the Springboks. Seems to be where everyone's mind is at the moment. So, guys, if you're tuning in to the Go Track, thanks for listening. As Carl said, goodness knows how, but the Go Track went up 53 places in the golf. Overnight, it went up 53 places and somehow is now occupying the number one spot on golf podcasts in South Africa. Look, it could be a very short stay on the summit, so we're going to breathe in the air and we're going to give it as much volume as we can. But it's good to see Carl and Jacques' hard work paying off. But yeah, we are talking. We are not talking golf tonight. We may do some golf banter towards the end of this, but we're about 2 weeks into the Rugby World Cup. We really wanted to further our discussions, our in-depth discussions. Which before we went live earlier, Jerome described our podcast studio as a bathroom. Which I think is pretty apt. We do apologize for the slight sound issues on the last podcast, but listen, if you came here for audio quality, then you're definitely in the wrong place. But yeah, there were a couple of rugby takes, so we might revisit a couple of those 2 weeks into this podcast. And then we're very psyched to have Jerome with us to give us some hot takes. He's an enthused Twitter user on the topic of rugby, and certainly has been a little bit of controversy even 2 weeks into the tournament. So I want to start by asking you, both of you, I'll start with you, Jerome, what has been kind of your highlights, your takeaway from the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's always funny because the World Cup is like the first part of it really is these pool stages, right? So some of it is actually a bit like rubbish. Well, not rubbish, but it's not really intriguing, right? I mean, like us beating Romania by 70, 80 points and Ireland beating Romania 70, 80 points. Not great, right? But what I do really enjoy about this beginning stages is watching some of the tier 2 nations playing nicely. Uruguay did very well against France. I was looking today. I mean, Uruguay were leading half time against Italy. Obviously, Fiji doing quite nicely. And so that for me is quite nice always to see, because I mean the tier 2 guys outside of the World Cup, barely play, right? So it's really great to see them getting this exposure and playing in tournaments where they can get the exposure and seeing their development and their growth. I mean, you can see, back in the day, Namibia used to take more than 100 points, and even them, they've slowly and steadily improved. Still, obviously, a long way to go, but. So that's what I quite enjoy, at least from a bit of a difference perspective. And I've enjoyed watching Fiji, I have to say. Especially that Wales game, it was just incredible game to watch. The Wales guys try to go toe to toe with them. So, whereas I think the Australian game was a bit different. I think they kind of went into their shell a bit. They didn't throw it around as much, but still, nonetheless, was great. So you're looking for those upsets. I think that's what these first few weeks are. That's what I really enjoy.
Yeah, and I'll just add in, we are recording this on Wednesday evening, and Italy have just beaten Uruguay. But that was a entertaining watch. Italy obviously proving pretty strong in the last sort of half an hour, 20 minutes. But again, it's really, really cool. I second what you're saying around watching a team like Uruguay. They gave France some decent fights as well. And you do wonder if teams like this got to play against quality opposition more often, how much it would have helped their development. Hoff, what's stood out to you so far?
Yeah, I think what Jerry is saying is 100% accurate. I think it's been epic to see. Maybe adding Portugal to that list as well. I thought they played pretty well against Wales as well. Epic line-out try they scored against Wales.
Yeah.
No surprise that Victor Matfield spent a couple of weeks with them leading up to the tournament. So you could see his mark on the little Portuguese oaks there. But yeah, I think the standout has definitely been Fiji. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they turned the screw against Australia. I'm really disappointed that they didn't get across the line against Wales. Obviously left it a little bit too late. Probably should have still got across the line, dropping the ball at the end there. But I mean, they've basically. I mean, our group was touted as a group of death, which I think it still is. But I mean that Australia group has turned into the actual group of death. I think two things for me have come out of it. One, the strength of, a tier 2 nation like Fiji, but also how weak Australia are. Cannot believe how insanely weak they are, how badly Eddie Jones has done. Maybe we'll be sitting here in 4 years' time if they elect not to sack him after this and say he was a flipping genius. I doubt it. I hope not. But yeah, those have basically been the two interesting things. I mean, it's such an interesting debate, this whole tier 1, tier 2 thing, because how do you factor these guys in? I mean, surely Fiji are only going to get better if they're in the Rugby Championship, right? But I mean, how do we all fly to Fiji and then fly to Argentina? And it's such a practical challenge for World Rugby. I also think the South American teams have done epically. I mean, Chile, where the hell have they come from? Uruguay, as we've said, epic. Argentina, okay, maybe in the context of Argentina, they've been a little bit disappointing. But I mean, from a South American perspective, suddenly we've got 3 nations playing decent-ish rugby. Where do they fit into the equation? So yeah, I think they've obviously been the big clashes. France, New Zealand was certainly a good one to kick off. I mean, it wasn't the greatest game of rugby, but sometimes hardcore test rugby is great in its own way, even if it's down and dirty like that. Scary performance by France. How calm they were, how calculated they were, which is very un-French-like historically. So yeah, I think it's been a really lacquer tournament so far. I think South Africa have been good. I'd like them to be a little bit better. It's going to be interesting to see Pollard at 2. Just kidding, but I think we all knew that was coming as well. But yeah, definitely the highlight's got to be Fiji beating Australia.
Yeah. So sorry,
jump in there. Carry on.
Just a few other things. I mean, I think the thing is that what has made a difference, I think, to Fiji and to the South American teams is the Fijian Drua getting regular game time. I think that's made a big difference. And there is that South American professional comp at the moment where there's a team from Chile. I think there's 2 from Argentina, 1 from Uruguay. So they're also getting more regular pro rugby, right? I think that's making a massive difference. And the MLR, Major League Rugby, funnily enough, didn't help America, but it's been helping some of the other countries get that exposure. But geez, you just look at Fiji. I mean, those guys are born rugby players. It is just insane. Huge, skillful, fast. And so,
what's so funny about them is their lockers, like the Oak playing lock is quicker than the Oak playing wing. I mean, they basically, you can only differentiate them because of the number on the back of their shirt.
100%. I mean, we go crazy when Erkje Snyman does his awesome, passes over the heads and that. But I mean, their Oaks have been doing that for years, right? So it's incredible. And as you say, I mean, I guess the big clashes are always there. I think there have been some disappointments. Like you say, Argentina wasn't great in the first game. Yeah, England, even though they have been winning. Japan, been disappointing. I thought they fought well for a bit in that game against England, but they kind of fell away. But some crackers this weekend. So looking forward to that.
I think also with the Tier 2 debate, I think the fact that they changed that rule where basically, the likes of Charles Piutau and Oaks that have played previously for the All Blacks and that can go and play for a Tier 2 nation has also been good. But I think playing is the most important thing, as you say. I heard quite an interesting suggestion on Jim Hamilton and Andy Good's podcast, where they were like, well, maybe there needs to be like a promotion relegation kind of situation for the Rugby Championship and the Six Nations, where if Italy finish last in the Six Nations and Georgia finish first in the second tier Six Nations, then they must come up, and likewise with the Rugby Championship. Although I suppose those kinds of things are always good for us as fans, but financially they just don't work,
Yeah, and it's also like a turkey voting for Christmas, right? Because the existing teams have to vote to have that. And I know that obviously Georgia has been pushing very hard to get into the Six Nations. And, the likes of the teams that have, and again, it always changes, but, like Italy and Scotland have obviously pushed back very heavily on that relegation thing. I mean, Scotland, you wouldn't think now because they actually, they're playing really well. But they have had some bad, worse years many moons ago. So that's also a tricky thing. But I just think, it really is time that World Rugby, because you want the game to grow, right? You want to have more teams competitive. You want to make it bigger. You shouldn't be afraid of that. You shouldn't be afraid of that as a big team. You should embrace that because, it's only going to be beneficial for you as well. It's bigger for your game. It's more exposure, so you feel that should also grow your game in ways you didn't think. So I don't think people should be scared of it. I know it's hard to not be, but that's just my sense.
It is interesting. Agreed. It is interesting that it's been such a closed system in some ways for so long. I mean, if you have to go back and look at the world rankings for the last, 20 years, there's a bit of churn amongst sort of the top 6 teams, and outside of that, maybe the 4 teams outside of that, a couple have changed here and there. But I really agree with what you're saying, Jerome, around the fact that, this is the one time that we really do get to see these teams, on a world stage and really see that there's actually a huge amount of potential for that growth of the game in terms of like viewership. Now, on the flip side, and my mind goes to cricket here immediately. If I look at what Australia and India and England have done,
right?
where they basically have tried to shrink,
Monopolized.
they've tried to shrink the game, and just completely, double down on the fact that they hold all the viewership and that, and us and teams that have tried to been coming up. I think of a team like Bangladesh. I think of Zimbabwe. I think of I guess teams like the Netherlands, and they're teams that we've seen a little bit of flashes from at the World Cups, but it's just they cannot break into the system. So, I would love to see some ideas around how we can improve kind of eyeballs on some of these teams. I'm sure they are playing each other, just not. Doesn't seem to. I mean, certainly not on my radar outside of the World Cup when these guys are playing each other.
I think the disappointing thing is that the model is there. If you look at like English football or football in general, with the whole relegation model, it's so fluid. There's so much on the line. No one's looking at it and going, Leeds United can't be relegated because financially it'll kill them. It is what it is, and that fluidity is almost what drives that sport. And on our side, it's like, well, the Sharks can't be relegated from the Currie Cup Premier Division because financially they just can't afford that, or, the game of rugby in South Africa can't afford that. And that seems to be the sort of almost like the American stance that we leaned towards a couple of years ago in Super Rugby, where we had conference systems and all of that kind of stuff. And, moving away from this relegation merit-based model, which I personally agree with it, and look, I can understand the talk about our eyes on games and money and all that kind of stuff, but as a fan, I mean, you want the game that you're watching to matter, whether it's the top of the table or the bottom of the table, and that's what killed Super Rugby. Watching
100%.
round 565 of Super Rugby. Reds versus the fucking Melbourne Rebels, with absolutely nothing on the line. I mean, there was nothing more flippin'
little drive by on the Rebels
that, But
No,
if that game had
Cole.
relegation on the line, it changes it.
Big time.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I mean, I think that was one of the biggest reasons Super Rugby crashed, because they took an American system, in terms of conferences. Not everyone plays everyone, and all this crazy, which the Americans, you've grown up with that. People accept it, and they're happy with it, right? And they took that system and tried to create it in Super Rugby when rugby is not really an American, it's not really an American sport. We've never grown up having the game be like that, right? And I think that was one of the biggest,
downfalls.
100%.
So listen, I want to going back to the World Cup now. We both touched on Fiji. I am not I am a enthusiastic rugby fan, but I certainly do not understand the nuances of the game and necessarily follow trends and patterns in that. So, what has happened in the last 2 or 3 years with Fiji that they are playing the type of game that we are seeing? Because when I watched the other night, at some stages, I actually said to whoever I was watching with, I said, gosh, it feels like I'm watching the Blue Bulls here. They were mauling, they were winning penalties, they were kicking ball, they were kicking penalties. As you say, they were keeping it tight. Honestly, they managed that game incredibly well. What has happened since the last World Cup? By the way, I don't know if you guys were aware of this. I just pulled up the 2019 World Cup. I see that Australia and Wales and Fiji were all in the same group as well.
And in 2015, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay. Because they got one victory out of 4. Fiji did at the last World Cup, which included Georgia and Uruguay in their pool. So it was a pretty disappointing World Cup in 2019 for them.
Yeah. Look, the Uruguay game was, I think they've tried to fix it this World Cup. It was like 4 days after either a Wales or Australia game. So they had to mix and match. And, obviously their depth is not as great as other teams. And Uruguay were fired up and they aimed for that game. So they were a little bit on the back foot. but still, you still back them to win it. It was a massive upset, right? I was actually looking on that. Someone posted the other day in terms of bookies, favourites, and upsets. And there haven't been a lot. Like each World Cup, only about 5 or 6 each time in the last sort of 2-3 World Cups. But yeah, I think Fiji, look, I mean, and another thing is, a lot of people do say World Rugby is not doing enough for the tier 2 teams, and, they can always do more, right? But I know that they do also, they kind of, what they have been doing is they focus on one team, and they provide them with a lot of resources within a cycle, in terms of, RB coaches and development and extra funding and all of that. And I don't think Fiji was in this last 4-year cycle, but it has had that opportunity. So I think that has helped because it's it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's got to really take time. I think the Fijian Drua, because you can't play Super Rugby and play that kind of game constantly. You just, it's not going to work. You have to have a better scrum. You have to have a better maul. You spend time together, right? You've got time to work on those things when you're playing club rugby. So I think that helps. And then obviously just the coaching. So. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you might know, but there was a guy who was at Vern Cotter, I think, who was Fijian coach, and then he's something happened there or something, and he kind of resigned. I don't know if it was this year or relatively recently. And Simon Raului, who I think was involved in the coaching setup, but that's like it's Vern Cotter is a serious coach, right? So. And Simon Raului seems to have really carried that forward. So I think it's a combination of factors, and that's all they need.
Yeah, I think the Drua is the most important one. I mean, if you look at like as soon as the Jaguares were in Super Rugby and Super Rugby was still at a reasonable level at that stage, suddenly Argentina were smashing it out the park. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, they've always been such a skillful, fast team. I mean, they've always been right at the top of the sevens game. It's just been their scrum, their line out, their set piece that has really battled.
Defense,
yeah. And they've pulled all of that together. I mean, the scary thing about their win against Australia was it was super like un-Fijian. They kicked the ball a lot. It wasn't like sevens tries and all of that kind of stuff. That's a scary thought for whoever's going to play them in the quarterfinals. If hopefully they get through that group, which fingers crossed they will. That's flippin' scary. If you England or whatever coming through that other group and you faced with Fiji, who've already beaten you at Twickenham, you're shitting your pants.
Yeah. I mean, because if that they've got that, that the gun's loaded with all of those sort of explosive skills, but they're still winning games with this type of rugby, then it's hard to.
12,
how do you strategize against that?
Joshua,
number 12's got
Tuisava.
the biggest legs I've ever seen in my life.
Insane.
He's got the biggest. I don't know how you can possibly tackle that.
I think four of my cards equals one of his.
Tree trunks.
6.
Yeah, no, honestly, Lavani Botia as well. He is also an absolute insane.
No, he's a maniac. Yeah. And they've also got a lot of quality players playing in France.
I was just about to say that. I think that's also...
Which helps as well.
And they've been able to get all of them involved and proper training and into the system. So they've got this great base with the Drua, and they've now been able to pull like a Botia and all these guys that are playing in the top 14 highest level, in top 14 finals and Heineken Cup. And I think it's just working. And I think Simon Raului is also obviously, he's Vern Cotter's built a good foundation and he's just carrying it through. So it's really like it to see. I'm enjoying it.
But I mean, going back to your cricket analogy, Terence, like if World Rugby don't do something about it and Fiji don't get to play South Africa in Fiji regularly and Australia and teams from overseas, then this is going to be like a every 4-year kind of thing, and I think that's maybe I know we haven't got there yet, but I mean, looking at the history of tier 2 nations and Georgia and all that kind of stuff, it's flippin' difficult to break through. But another, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, T, but the other issue that we didn't raise, and I'm interested to hear Jerome's sort of take on it. Jerome and I have already had a couple of robust debates about this issue on our Varsity WhatsApp group. So just to give maybe I should have done it earlier, but to give a little bit of background when Jerome was talking about his credentials. So
it was very short.
So-
His credential list was very short.
Yeah, there's not much
Yeah,
credentials
so-
here. Boy. There's not much credentials here.
So Jerome, where Jerome and my history come from is we obviously both studied at Rhodes together, lived together, and pretty much anything to do with sport, Jerome and I are in the conversation on opposite ends. Apart from the fact that we both support the Springboks. So Jerome is ardent Bulls, I'm ardent Sharks. He's an Arsenal fan, I'm a Liverpool fan. And so his credentials were very much came to the fore when we were a bomb of crackling down and trying to strangle each other because we disagreed wholeheartedly with the other one was saying. So that's
I think it sums it up well.
That's the real credential. But I mean, there's no doubt that apart from the rugby side of things, the biggest issue here has been reffing. Rule controversies. It's been all over social media. It's on every podcast I've listened to. And as I say, we've had our own sort of robust debates on it. And specifically, I suppose there's always going to be inconsistencies in rugby, right? But the biggest inconsistency it seems at this World Cup so far is the issues with head contact, head on head, shoulder on head. So maybe with that intro, J-Bone, give us your take.
Maybe just before you do that, can you just explain or maybe just set the scene for me, Jerome, as a serious like grade 1 kind of rugby fan? What has been where was the rule and what has changed? Because my understanding is that the change is fairly recent. I think it's at some point this year, from what I understand. And it's also just recently been implemented in the amateur rugby, at the amateur rugby level. And I also believe there's a bit of controversy around that. But what are the sort of key rules that have changed, which has sparked some of this kind of controversy so far?
Yeah. So look, I mean, you must correct me as we go along here on the facts, but I don't think it's been all of a sudden. It's been a gradual change. Obviously with the World Cup on, they show a lot of past World Cups and old games, and you see what used to go down, and you're just like, my word, it's another world. In terms of, if you hit a guy, punched him, it'd be like, okay, go for 10 minutes, see you 10 minutes. I mean, now that's it, red card, there's no questions asked. And
well, 91 World Cup, you punch someone, it's fine.
Might not even have been, yeah. They might have just given a penalty, you know what I mean? So the game has steadily changed over a long period of time. And I think a lot of reasons, there's been a lot of reasons for that. There's, for one, you look at the NFL, and I think it's kind of started with that, with all those guys getting, I think it's CBT, the concussion thing where, you have mental health issues later in life. And now there's this big, or threatening this big class action from some of the top players. Cole Heyman's involved. He's a name that you'd probably remember, but there's a few other guys, a guy from Wales. The list is growing. So I think World Rugby is under increasing pressure to show that they're doing something, and that they're warning players that, this is the risk, and that they're being shown to do something to avert these issues, right? So it has been a gradual change. My personal view, and it is a very difficult discussion because I can hear both sides, but I think there's a place where we are a lot more careful, because we don't want, young kids or people that could be incredible rugby players to not play because whatever it may be, their parents just, feel it's too risky, or they get a couple of head knocks. You look at what happened to Pat Lambie. He got that one head knock he just never recovered from.
Still suffering.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you must also realize that change is always hard, because you are used to something and it is difficult and it is painful. But the only way you do it is you've got to be strict. You've got to do these red cards. You've got to take a hard line. And I know, there's inconsistency and there's going to be sort of growing pains. I accept that, which is not ideal. And I think we can all agree that inconsistency in refereeing is incredibly frustrating, or sanctions once a guy's been, cited and all of that. And I 100% agree. But I think fundamentally the principle to try and make it safer, I think should still be very carefully looked at and sort of advanced. Again, we can talk about how we should do that. But I do think it's something. I mean, the science is there, right? And someone like Carl Ham, incredible rugby player, and his brain's battered and bruised. It's incredibly sad. So
the intention is good and positive. And what we're seeing at the moment is a very early issues with the sort of officiating of it, and the actual kind of teething issues around players like having not adapted necessarily to the rules, and then also some inconsistencies around how it's been applied. I mean, I think those have probably been the biggest frustrations that have come out of the World Cup so far. I think, the obvious one was I guess was it the Tom Curry incident from the first round of matches, where guys were putting that up against I think there was it Jesse Creel, who also had there were a couple of those side by side images, which looks a bit tough on World Rugby and on the refs. So for me, as like a very average kind of couch fan, I guess what I find frustrating is when there's no clear distinction between kind of accidental contact and like intentional contact on the field. And I know that that's probably difficult for referees to discern, but with all the sort of TV technology and that we have now, it does seem still a bit frustrating that there's some incidents which seem very minor in their actions are given a punishment which can have a huge. I mean, that England getting a red card in the first sort of 5 minutes. I mean, should have had a huge impact on the outcome of that game.
They're used to playing with 14 men now.
Yeah, that's true.
Owen Farrell's just been getting them to practice that for a while. Yeah,
exactly. Now, look, I hear you. I think the thing is, it's such a tricky thing, right? And the inconsistency is maddening. I hear you. The thing that comes to mind is that Grant Williams tackle in that Argentina game at Ellis Park, and the ref didn't even stop the game. Never mind, and then he didn't give a penalty, nothing. And then the guy got red carded. I mean, that is infuriating stuff, right? So yeah, I hear you completely.
And even the bans that go with it. I mean, if you look at the Samoan guy that got 12 weeks, Owen Farrell got 0. I mean, that was an absolute farce. Then World Rugby appealed it, and suddenly he got 3 or 4. I mean, the Oak's been tackling with the wrong shoulder for bloody years,
Yeah.
And I think all of that plays into it. I hear the view of trying to protect guys. I think it's an important one, but I also think World Rugby need to almost figure out what their mandate is. Like, are they out there to protect players? And if so, how far does that mandate extend? Or are they there to protect the game? And that's not to say that they're mutually exclusive. You can have a mandate in one and still protect players in the other. I hear your point that rugby's been changing for a long time, and I certainly agree with that. But now listening to guys trialing rules about tackling below the waist and all of that, I'm almost like, is this the same game? Is this the same sport that we're watching? And is it going to get to a point where guys almost say, okay, well, if you want to stay here and play this game and watch this game, that's fine. I'm going to go and play normal rugby on this side. I don't know if that's a year away, 5 years away, 10 years away, 50 years away, even an option. I don't know. It's just speculation, of course. But, I don't think rugby can sustain a further split. I mean, let's be honest, if there was no such thing as rugby league, our sport would be massive, especially in Australia. It would actually be scary.
I actually can't believe that there is such a thing as rugby league still. But, that's a debate for another day.
Exactly.
It's got to be one of the most boring sports in the world.
But I don't quite know what World Rugby's mandate is because, I don't think they should be scared by a class action. And I'm not saying that they are, but, I heard an interesting view on a podcast where, they basically spoke about boxing in that. And they were like UFC, where, you go into those sports knowing that there is a significant risk of being completely, fucked in the head, really, going forward. And if someone said to a boxer, like, from now on, you can only hit below the chin kind of thing, you can't hit the face, is that still boxing? That's the question for me. Like, is this going too far? For me personally, I think it is. I get that we need to respect players, and I don't think guys should be intentionally knocking each other out and all that kind of stuff. But I think these head-on-head incidents, sure, they're dangerous. I get that, but they're not intentional. And I think the interpretation of it just takes the situation to the next level. That you've got Curry with a ban, the Chilean guy with a yellow, and then Jesse Creel didn't even have a penalty against him, thank God. I saw it live. I was like, oh, he's fucked. He's gone.
Which was the right decision as well.
I was kind of like, just play on, move on.
100%.
Yeah.
So,
but in hindsight, to be honest, I think you could have distinguished his one. I haven't watched the Chilean one as in depth, but in Jesse's one, he definitely hits the chest first, and that's a huge difference there, right? But look, I completely hear you, Carl. I completely hear you.
I'm scared that this is going to decide a World Cup.
I think that's a
someone's
valid
going to
concern.
come out the air. Someone's going to come out the air and knock someone in the head, and and that's it. And if that's us, fuck, man.
No, it's devastating.
Soul destroying.
Devastating
So,
stuff.
they almost need to decide what they want. World Rugby, where do they want to go?
I hear you. And I think these hard conversations have been had at NFL also big time, and I think there's probably very differing views. But I think also, just to talk about your other question in terms of intention and sort of mistakes. Now, okay, I'm probably going to reveal some more of my credentials, but how myself and Alf also know each other is we studied law together at varsity, and I'm still a lawyer. And deciding what is intentional, what is negligent, what is reckless, with the most facts ever, experts, lawyers that you think about for months and months, people still get it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Look at the Oscar Pistorius trial as an example. You know what I mean? That it was the first culpable homicide in the High Court, and it got turned over when it went to the SCA. So to ask a ref in those moments to decide if something is intentional or not, I think would make it just almost impossible to ref. And I hear you as well, because you don't want an accidental thing to be a red card, right? It's just you're not doing it intentionally, right? But I think
if someone
that'll
runs,
make it even more inconsistent.
If someone runs into another guy's head, like the way Tom Curry did it, it seems pretty.
It's tough.
To me, it seems pretty obvious that it wasn't intentional. It wasn't It wasn't a flying headbutt.
I think the easiest thing to stop interpretational issues would just be, if it's going to be zero tolerance, then if it's head on head or shoulder on head, you fucking gone. That's it.
It's red, irrelevant.
Nothing to interpret. That's it. But it seems, I can understand scrummages being interpreted in different ways, mauls, rucks. You can pick out 30 penalties in every frickin' ruck, I can understand that being having issues. But with this, it must be zero or not at all. It can't be kind of zero tolerance, and that's kind of what it feels like at the moment. It's like luck of the draw, Let's see what the bunker has to say. And listening to Steve Hansen's comments before the World Cup. He was saying that. He's like, once it goes to the bunker, you just don't freaking know. You don't. Is this yellow? Is it red? Is it 3 games? 0 games? There's zero consistency.
Go to tackle school like Owen Farrell.
Go to tackle school.
Apparently pass it and then do it like a couple of months later. So obviously, tackle school's exams are not too strict.
So I was reading just out of interest. I was reading an article about they've just kind of implemented these law changes, in the amateur games.
Yeah, I think in England, right?
In some club rugby games, yeah. And they interviewed a whole bunch of amateur rugby players around how essentially how did the first week of your matches go? And I mean the feedback is pretty scathing. And now obviously you're now dealing with a lower tier of like referees as well. So, there isn't as clear communication. They're not trained necessarily as proficiently. But, it was quite interesting reading it. I mean, the one guy said that every time somebody tried to rip the ball in their game, the referee blew it as a high, essentially a high hit because it was above the sternum. So he said there were like something like 15 penalties for like guys essentially just trying to rip the ball. And I guess, I suppose like from my perspective, being I'm kind of like a couch, I'm a couch rugby fan, and I love the game, and I'll watch every Springbok game, and I'll watch. I'm a Sharks fan, so I'll probably watch 50% of. 50% is probably a lie. I'll probably watch 20% of like Sharks games in a year.
That's an impressive number in this day and age.
That's 20% too much.
Yeah, but okay. So my point is, I'm not watching a crazy amount of rugby, but I echo some of your thoughts, Hoff, in that rugby has a brand. The game of rugby has a brand that it needs to consider, because it is considered to be one of the most sort of raw kind of physical games in the world. And that is what, that's what it stands out to when you sit down and watch a game of rugby. And I've done this many times with a friend who's from North America or whatever. Guys are like, holy shit, this is nuts, and not because guys are beating each other over the head like they do in ice hockey or whatever it is, but just because of the non-stop, like it's not a single play like NFL and then they all like high five each other, for 30 seconds, and it's a 10
like
minutes.
The English team currently.
Yeah,
it's like 10 100%. Minutes of like ferocious like 20 phases and guys just like beating each other and dudes bleeding and like whatever. And it's like if they go too far with some of these rule changes to the point where people go like, you know what, I'm not 100% sure what I'm watching here, because it seems to be that like a minor contact between players is now considered kind of illegal. I have concerns for like that kind of brand, for that shine coming off of that brand of rugby. I'm completely on board, and having a son who's like 9 years old and has just started playing rugby, like, I really want it to be safe, and I really want it to be safe from grassroots level. I want the kids, and of course, the coaches, they teach the kids, they're trying to tackle below the knees, etc. But I do think that there's a balance to be struck, and I think from what I've seen in the World Cup so far, they've gone a little bit too far.
Yeah. Look, I hear you guys. I think it's always also, how do you change behavior and how do you change outcomes, right? There's many ways you can do it. You can kind of hit it with a sledgehammer, ban everyone, do red cards. I always feel that's quite a negative way of trying to change things. For me, I always think a better way of changing things is to get people to believe that rugby can still be that sport that you guys have been talking about, that where there's the collisions and it's fierce, but it's also, lots of, it's skillful and it's fast and it's, all of those things. but that, you don't go for a guy's head. It's basically off. Everything else is fair game. Maybe there's parts between his groin, but apart from that,
that's a
unless you buck Shelford. So, and I think
Johan Leroux.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's the thing is that I don't know. Like, do you get like the key leaders and coaches to buy into this and to start from the top and say, guys, we love this game. We hate the way that all this reffing thing is stuffing it up, but we've got to be better. We've got to train better. We've got to try hit lower.
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. But I think they've just
I don't know if Oaks are doing enough.
I
don't know if guys are doing enough. You know what I mean? I mean, look at Owen Farrell. How does Owen Farrell still playing? Honestly.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, the guy goes to tackle school. He comes back. He does it like the first game back. I mean, it's just insane.
But that's why I say if they're gonna go zero tolerance, then do it. Go all in. But then it can't be an interpretational issue. Okay, yeah, maybe one or two, I can understand that. But for the most part, head on head, shoulder on head, fucking gone. That's it. That's how it changes. It's a scary thing because what's the next change and what's the next change?
I suppose if you think about racking, I was also seeing I think it was on Supersport. They're showing like an ad or something of racking, like back in the day. Jeez, guys used to get absolutely destroyed.
No, it's intense. And
that's
U-bolts.
gone, right?
U-bolting in our day at school was like, if you could U-bolt someone, you're like a hero for 3 months, And that's gone.
But remember, that was outlawed, quite a while ago, and you don't really see them anymore. Yeah. Like, obviously, that George, was it the Tongan guy? Who was it? Was it a Tongan guy? Yeah, the tip tackle. That was for a tip tackle, right?
Yeah.
But you see, that's the thing. So that's changed. We don't talk about tip tackles. I mean, it just doesn't happen anymore, right?
Yeah.
So 100%. That's the place you want to be.
I think they've just got to go all in then.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got to stick. They've got to stick to it or not do it at all. But they've got to choose. They've got to choose an identity. They can't be scared. They've got to do what they think is right to protect guys and not be scared of the lawsuits and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, even moving. My fear as a South African fan is obviously we're so good at the physicality. That's what we're fucking good at. And my fear is that this is going to change. This is going to change that brand and move it away to a different kind of brand, which will suit the All Blacks. I mean, listening to the breakdown and Jeff Wilson and all those boys. I mean, they drive me. The other day when we fucked them up at Twickenham, the one oak, I don't know what his name is. He came on and he's like, "Yo, World Rugby need to do something about this. They need to speed the game up. It's unfair." I mean, he's not having a go at the game or at the way the game was reffed. He's having a go at the rules themselves. I was like, cheapers, that is proper sour grapes, But, I mean, the reason why rugby is so cool is that it can be played in so many different ways, right? And you've got fat guys,
Absolutely.
Tall guys, big guys, strong guys, small guys.
You got a team like Fiji, incredible, amazing to watch. You got a team like England, absolutely terrible to watch, like paint dry, right?
Dog show.
Paint dry.
Yeah.
I guess the problem, Carl. I guess the problem
Yeah.
is like with tip tackles. It's a fairly it was a fairly easy thing to define, right? It was like
It was. It goes
they
through
had
the
that
90.
You go through the 90, whatever. When guys are coming, I mean, if you're going to try and protect someone's head in rugby, like in contact scenarios, it's a very,
tough.
very
It's very
difficult
tough.
thing to do.
I accept it.
I mean, it's the same as taking oaks out in the air, right? That you hardly see that anymore.
You see, that's another example, though. You see, remember, like if you think about even 10 years ago, I mean, that was hectic. I mean, remember Kwagga Smith in the Super Rugby final at Ellis Park? Yeah,
or Brian Habana in the 2007 Super Rugby final. It could have changed the whole game, Jerome.
I think
there was a lot in that game that could have changed.
I think parting thoughts on the rules thing for me is, as kind of a pretty amateur armchair fan, I would like to see some sort of leveling out in rugby rules to where the game, and look, Carl, that clip I sent you earlier before this podcast, I mean, it's outrageous when you watch that now. I mean, it's like a tip tackle followed by like an Oak diving in with a shoulder onto the scrum half.
Jerome, it's corner cricket basically. You
And
bolting
then
a wall
the
shot.
Springboks,
it's South Africa Wales. I think I've seen
and the
that
Springboks
clip
win the
before.
penalty. I mean, it's
South Africa get the penalty.
I've seen that clip
classic.
before. Yeah.
I don't want to watch that sort of rugby. So, but I would like to see us get to a point where, you season by season, you're not watching a different game. I mean, if you went into a time warp 10 years ago and you watch the game of rugby now, it's completely different. But listen, we all flipping still love it. We've got about 10 minutes left here, guys. I'd like to chat about sort of the games going forward. We haven't spoken about the Springboks that much. We've had obviously one very kind of tense opening game, which was potentially a banana peel for us, which I thought we navigated pretty well. What are your guys' thoughts? Obviously, this is the big one coming up this weekend. Jerome, talk to me about where your head's at with the Boks.
Yeah, look, after the 2019 World Cup, I kind of thought, and this was what Rassie said after we won the World Cup. He said, it was incredible. We won the World Cup, but what we really want to do is we want to be like New Zealand and be consistent, right? In between World Cups. And sadly and frustratingly, that didn't really play out. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that. I think COVID played a role, in terms of just completely destroying an entire year of rugby and Springboks building and all of that. And then we had the Lions tour where we just had to win. And things just didn't quite always come together. Rassie was banned and, all those things, which was a bit disappointing for me, I must say. And so leading into this World Cup, I was a bit concerned, I have to say. I just felt our consistency wasn't there. But I feel like Rassie and Jacques, it's really just been about the World Cup. I think ultimately when they took that job, all those years ago, for them, that 2019 World Cup was really a bonus. That wasn't their aim, right? It ended up being an incredible win. And I think this was always what they aimed at. We definitely we're starting to look to come together nicely at the right time. Obviously it's a hell of a long way to go. And if we do make it, it's going to be, in my opinion, definitely the best win in terms of being the best team, because we would have had to beating
the best teams as well.
Well, that's it. I think we have to be honest with ourselves. 2007-19, we got a little bit of the nicer end of the draw in some respects. I think 95 was a bit different. I think that one, we played an incredibly good French team, played Australia in the pools and obviously beat New Zealand in the final. Whereas I think 07 and 19, we definitely got a bit luckier. So I think if we do it, it would be an incredible win. I'm excited. Look, I think the team is looking good. Obviously, quite a lot of injuries. I must say, Malcolm Marx, I think I stopped working for a day after that. I didn't know what to do with myself. That was incredibly, incredibly depressing. But you just got to back the guys. And Mark van Staden's been training at hooker apparently. Now we got a 7-1 bench just now. I'm actually going to say that Kwagga's basically been training at scrum half. Who knows what's up
scrum off.
Fifth scrum off, exactly. But it's going to be really tough. Ireland are an incredible team. They've, surprisingly, I think Joe Schmidt laid some incredibly good foundations over a long period of time. And it's kind of bearing fruit, and they've kind of just followed that on, and they really know what they're good at and what they're skillful at, and they're kind of squeezing a lot out of a smaller sponge. They don't have the players that other countries do, the player pool. But let's see. They've always sort of underperformed at World Cups, and so is this one different? I guess we'll have to see.
Hoff, where's your head at with the Boks?
Yeah, I think Jerome's touched on most of the things I certainly agree with, which is weird because I don't really agree with Jerome very often. I think we've come together at the right time. I was a bit worried when we took that pasting against New Zealand in New Zealand, but it's worked out. We've come together at the right time. We seem to be playing the brand of rugby that we like. Goal kicking still a big sort of concern, question mark for me. I really like Mani Labak as like a running fly half in that.
That's why Pollard's coming in as a sub hooker.
As a hooker, yeah, exactly.
First hooker
I think we'll probably need Pollard later on in the tournament. I've got I back the box like fully. Probably, yeah. I agree with Jerome again. Like way more than I did in 2019. 2019 was definitely a shock. But what does concern me about Ireland is they're a clever team and they seem to play well against us specifically. They can lose to New Zealand at the Aviva one weekend and we playing well, and then they manage to beat us. They know how to drag us down to their level, and that sounds pretty disparaging of them, and probably is. But they do.
When you have a guy like Johnny Sexton that plays for you, I don't think much is disparaging.
And they're clever, So I mean, they've watched how we took Finn Russell out the game against Scotland by just rushing him. I mean, he looked like a deer in the headlights. And Johnny knows it's coming for him. He knows he's going to get a shoulder. He knows he's going to get rushed. So what are they going to do? Are they going to pass it around the back? Are they going to try and get around our defense? So those are concerns. Are we good enough to beat them? 100%. Are we a better team than them? 100%. But, they've been really, really good of late. I hope they've peaked again. Obviously, it doesn't seem like they have. But yeah, it's a scary one. It makes my palms sweat just thinking about it. I wasn't concerned about Scotland, really. I am against Ireland. It's a bit of a bogey team. If we lose, it doesn't mean that we're out, of course. But if we win, and we can then beat New Zealand in the quarterfinal, as J-Bone says, it'll definitely be the most intense Rugby World Cup win. And to be honest, whoever wins the Rugby World Cup, because let's be honest, it's going to come from our side of the draw. New Zealand, France, us, Ireland. It will be an intense World Cup for whichever one of those four teams are going to win, and it is going to be one of those four teams.
100%.
Well, Carl, that's interesting. That's interesting because in our preview Rugby World Cup preview pod, I was going to bring this up. You mentioned that that there could be a team coming from that somehow find some form from the other side of the draw, and if they can sneak through like a semi-final and get into the final, then who knows what will happen. Now, when I watched England play that first game, immediately I thought of those comments of yours because I thought, shit, as Hoffman...
Look, it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely going to happen because their side of the draw is so easy. And the scary thing is that they can get to a final and anything can happen. I mean, that's what happened in 2007 with England getting to the World Cup final.
Exactly.
And they've still got decent players, right? They got good players.
Yeah. But I still think the winner's going to come from our side. It's going to come from those four. There has to be a team from that side, of course, just logically. But I think Australia will take a pasting. Wales will take a pasting. Yeah, England could frickin' weasel their way, into something. Fiji will be good. I don't think they'll be good enough to get through a semi-final.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see England in a semi-final. Haven't seen anything that tells me that they're good enough to win the World Cup, not against the teams on our side of the draw. I personally, I'm so psyched for this Ireland game because I totally agree with everything you guys have said. I think Ireland have always stood up to us and have always played really well against us. On the same front, I also think that we haven't always had as dynamic coaches in the past as we do now. And I think sometimes, our coaches are very much stuck to their guns in terms of this is the brand of rugby we play and you know what you're going to get. And Ireland have strategically sometimes, found a way to beat us. I'm very interested to see what Rassie and Jacques have got cooked up. I mean, the bench and the fact that we don't necessarily know who our reserve hooker is like it's like it's
is it Marco van Staden or is it Deon Fourie?
Like is Deon Fourie gonna like come on wing or like if we get a backline injury, like we're going to see, like it's going to be very interesting.
Quacker is a backline. There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
Seven's credentials are going to come through.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
But it was funny. I was watching a sort of extract from an Irish podcast, and I don't know. They're naming their team. I think 48 Hours is still coming, right? But they were discussing the point, like, do they name now like 6-2? Because they normally go 5-3 bench, right? They don't normally do a 6-2 bench. It's like, so do they go 6-2 or not? And they're like, yeah, but then they know that we know that they know, and it's like, geez, you're going on a bloody rabbit warring here. So. It's nice. Look, I mean, it's the Irish are great people, right? And their team is playing incredible rugby. I think they're going to enjoy it.
I think for me, not being I know guys are purists and sort of they want, in the last World Cup there was a bit of hana about the fact that we didn't win every game and we still won the World Cup, but I don't really give a shit. And like, so for me, what I like about this game is that it's going to be tense and it's going to be exciting and that, but it's not going to be the end of the road for us. And at the end of the day, the team that wins is going to play the All Blacks, right, in the quarterfinals essentially. So
I mean, France All Blacks, it's they're both tough, right? Maybe France at home is maybe a bit tougher. But it's so marginal.
It's potato, yeah. Geez, guys, we've just cranked over like exactly over an hour. So this has been good stuff. I was expecting a bit more tension between you guys based on what Hoffa told me. I was expecting like some real war of words.
The brandies haven't been flowing.
Okay. We should have got a bomb of crackling.
We're chatting about the only thing that we've ever agreed on, which is Springboks.
Well,
even that's a stretch, but if you're talking about provincial rugby, or especially historically, if we're talking about 2007, the year 2007, I've kind of blanked it out of my mind, but that'll get the blood pumping.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I also think provincialism has changed a bit over the years. Like honestly, back in 2007, I remember watching rugby with all these guys from KZN. And as soon as a Bulls guy, now watching a Springbok game, Bulls guy would get the ball and he would do something bad. Oaks would be in my face like, hey, Bulls, rubbish. Then like a Sharks Oak would do something like not even that impressive. And Oaks would be like jumping up and down. And, it was just like incredible. I'm like, Oaks, we're supporting the same team here, right? We want the Springboks to do well. Like, why are you cucking on an Oak that he's doing, yes, okay, he plays for the Bulls, but he's not wearing a blue jersey right now. And so
listen, 2007 wasn't a good year for us as Sharks fans. The Bulls were. It was a tough scene at Kings Park that day.
Yeah. But don't let Jerome mislead you with those comments, Terence. It wasn't all a one-way street. Let me tell you.
I bet.
His mom came to us once and was like, shame, man. He's the only Bulls fan amongst like 40 Sharks fans. Like, shame, man. Go easy on him. I was like, Linda, have you ever watched a Sharks Bulls game with your son? If you have, you would know the pain that we have all been through. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
But so we've been talking about issues that are pretty Luke. If we get Jerry on maybe we do a flashback pod at some stage and talk about some historical rugby, then you'll see some interesting, robust debate. Maybe get Bingers on you, Jerry.
Yes, that'll be a real clash. Boy. I think Bingers would disagree just for the sake of it.
Although we would need an interpreter.
Fair enough.
Well, Jerry, we're definitely going to get you back on, and at some point, hopefully we can stoke up some of that provincial rivalry again in this country, because I sort of miss it as well. It became so watered down when the Sharks were playing the Bulls for the 8th time in a season.
I think that also played it, right? Played a role. It was like it wasn't even a special thing anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really, less is more. They really need to get back to that. And I know SuperSport will not agree with me, but hopefully we can get back to some kind of system where there's a bit more meaning to some of these games.
You actually care if you win or lose a game.
Yeah,
at Loftus.
You have one shot at it.
That used to affect my whole freaking week, my whole month. was, that game, or, losing to Province or whatever the case may be.
The Stormers are still the worst to lose to. Sheesh, honestly.
Guys,
the
this
guys
has
from
been...
the Cape think the sun shines out of their arse, even though it's still raining there and it's September.
Guys, this has been super fun. Thanks for jumping on with us, Jerome. Good luck to you on Saturday. I hope you've got a good setup lined up for watching the game.
Yeah, it's actually my sister's wedding, so it's going to be a bit tricky. I am MC, so I'm obviously going to at least have some kind of control in terms of making sure things are done by the time there's kickoff.
Yeah,
and trying to find
you've got a vested interest. Yeah,
but it's still going to be a tricky one to navigate. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah, the dance floor is going to empty out between 9 and 10:30. That's going to be the grandparents' time to do some dancing, I think.
I've always thought, like, as a wedding venue or like a wedding planner, like, just like tell the people, listen, there's a rugby game this weekend. Like, don't, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to face some uphill battle. Anyway.
At least do it in the bye, like the bye weekend. I see. We've got a week off between the quarterfinals. That would have been more appropriate. Listen, it's not too late, eh? I mean, but you could still have a word with your sister now.
Try explain that to some people. You're like, and it's like, it's just a rugby game. It's like, come on, please, man. It's just, and I'm like, are you joking? This only happens every 4 years. Like, come on. So anyway.
Well, listen, Hoff, it was nice to... We weren't actually playing together the other day, but it was nice to be on a golf course at the same time as you last week and sharing some banter afterwards. I must say, I really enjoyed Cotswold. I haven't played there in ages. It was really, really lekker. So, yeah.
Tough.
It was firm and fast. That was the firmest and fastest I've ever seen.
I thought it was going to be a hell of a long day when I lost 2 balls with my first 2 shots of the day. I thought, oh, fuck this. But yeah, it was fun. It got better with time. So
yeah, absolutely.
It was nice to be out there again.
That was my start as well. I was very much in first gear for the first sort of 6 holes, but thoroughly enjoyed it, and we will have to organize Jerome, next time we do a podcast, it's going to be on a weekend with you. And you're going to be a couple of brandies down.
Sounds good.
And I want the Bluebills jersey on just to get under Hoff's skin. Yeah, but cool, guys. I hope, let's hope things go as planned this weekend, and look forward to the next catch-up.
Lekker.
Lekker.
Thanks so much. Cheers.